Today we've got a fun malicious compliance story about folding pizza boxes. We'll get into that in just a bit. But first, wife wants verbal confirmation that I'm listening. You got it, dear. My wife and I went out to lunch for Valentine's Day, which is much better than dinner for V-Day. The food was tasty and I was feeling great and full. While driving, I was just more quiet and content, and she was talking up a storm. Suddenly, she stops and says, "Are you actually listening to me?" I affirm that I was and repeat the main points of the last 10 minutes to her. You know, I like it when people actually affirm that they're listening throughout the conversation. I saw my opportunity and quickly agreed. Then she started talking again, and I made sure to pick times that were slightly off to say, "Uh-huh." After the fourth time, she became exasperated. "Say uh-huh one more time." And of course I did, then sat there with my crap-eating grin. I'm sad to say I lost the resulting tickle war in a quilting store parking lot. Yeah, all I'll say to this is know your audience before you pull a stunt like this. Even if you're married, even if it's your wife, your girlfriend, your spouse, what have you, sometimes this can just be like pouring kerosene on the fire. But glad that they were able to settle this cordially with a good old-fashioned tickle fight. Good story. Shadow Fox commented, "My husband once commented that I never question what he's talking about. He regrets that now, 4 months in. I know way too much about various video game programming codes now, though." And Kinchik responded, "Same, I like to be an active listener. How can I expect him to listen to me unless I listen to him? And now I can converse intelligently on every character in Street Fighter 6 and their comparative strengths and weaknesses. Ugh. But he listens to my going on about cross-stitch threads and fabrics and patterns, so it's worth it." Also, hi, I'm Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these malicious compliance videos, it would be so cool and awesome if you left a like or commented down below if you're listening to our podcast. That being said, our next story is, carefully study these two files and tell me what's going on here. I'm very sorry that I'm bad at being brief, but I'm going to be cackling about this one for a while. Background: I work for a company that does work for HOA. Yes, they do suck, but I like being able to afford my bills. So, a lot of HOAs have management companies that give them a manager to advise them on stuff. This is who gets our bills. At one point, one of the managers at one of these companies was looking to leave, and my boss, in all her brilliance, ignored me when I said he's not the right type of person for her to work with. She's difficult and needs employees who can stand up to her without challenging her. And he's a challenger. She hired him anyway, because his background appealed to her. After 2 months of my life being heck trying to train someone who thinks he knows more than me, but can't use a computer, she got sick of him challenging her over everything and fired him. He started his own management company, and went after some of our clients that hadn't found management yet, so we still have to interact with him. Both clients he landed were absolute messes, with past due balances that meant we stopped doing work for them until they get caught up. The story: we sent him all the past due invoices for both clients when he took them on at the end of last year, and have not done any real work for either since. He keeps emailing and asking for meetings to discuss the billing, and then doesn't pay it, but comes back and complains that they got another bill because we billed them for the meeting time. This is very standard in our industry. Yesterday, he decided for some reason to involve me, and he should not have done that. He and my boss have been going back and forth in emails for hours, and have racked up thousands of words back and forth about how we've explained this billing to him so many times, we aren't going to spend any more time on it. Yes, she's actively arguing with him while telling him she's not going to spend any more time on him. That's when he comes back with, "Carefully study these two files and tell me how last month this client had a balance of $5,100 and this month they have a balance of $8,400. The compliance." So I open both files. Insert Kendrick's halftime smirk.gif. Remember when I said he got 2 of our clients to sign on with him? The $5,100 balance was for the other client. So I shot back with, "Please note, the $5,100 invoice is for client B, not client A, as you have attributed. Please see attached email from December with all outstanding invoices for client A up until that point, and a second email from January with the newest invoice for the time we spent explaining the billing and providing the invoices in December. In an effort to assist you with your accounting, I've also attached an account summary for client A. Just a reminder that client A and client B are 2 separate clients, and their accounting should be accordingly handled separately." Suddenly, he is very sorry for the confusion and will go back over all the documentation before letting us know his findings. Moral of the story? Don't go full bore on an argument if you aren't absolutely sure some admin somewhere isn't going to step in and destroy you with one email after hours of acting like we don't know what we were doing. Edit. I realize in my attempt to be somewhat vague, I didn't really relay the implications of the fallout here. I work for lawyers, and this man handed us proof that he's potentially mishandling client funds by mishandling their accounting. Since the clients are all nonprofits, that means their funds are held in trust accounts, which have a lot of laws and red tape involved. So, if he's charging the wrong clients for vendor invoices, there's likely some legal recourse. At the very least, he's likely to lose the only 2 clients we know he has, and struggle to find new ones, since we'll recommend any client considering him not to, and our client pools are mostly a circle on a Venn diagram. Since the attorneys had been battling with him about this for months, no one else was opening anything he sent anymore, because we had provided everything he could have possibly needed multiple times, so we couldn't figure out what he was still arguing, and were already considering going directly to the client but didn't have anything tangible. It wasn't until that line in his email irked me enough to get directly involved. Prior to this, I was CC'd on this particular chain, but I hadn't responded at all, just watched the scene play out. That I figured out he handed us a giant red flag to potentially get legal proceedings involved, which wouldn't have been noticed by anyone if I hadn't maliciously complied with this specific demand. Yet they brought all of that upon themselves. Props to OP for being prepared to just drop the hammer when it came down to it. Good job. Mr. S commented, "Your new competitor isn't going to last long, and with screw-ups like that could very well find himself facing lawsuits." Emmy is Me responded, "Oh, he's not a competitor. Him and his company folding won't affect us in any way. We had the clients before he was involved, and we'll have the clients after he's involved." Unfortunately for him, we're his client's lawyers. I assume one of the attorneys involved will inform the clients of how his incompetence is the reason we can't finish our work for either of them, so I would be surprised if both clients don't decide to find new management soon. Our next story is, using tennis balls as MC. I go to tennis classes at the local club twice a week. One of the other alumni on the class is a 50-year-old gardener. Cool guy, has been working in the business since he was like 20. We live in a smallish town, so a lot of people know him, and he's worked for quite a few in town over the years. He's generally well-liked and friends with mostly everybody. There's one thing he does wrong about his business. He trusts people a lot, to the point that sometimes he agrees on a price for some work without drafting a contract. He goes, does the job, and gets paid. The old school handshakes and words are enough contract if you know the other guy school of thought. Right next to the tennis courts, there's a house with a big garden. One day, one of us overhit a ball and it ended in said garden. Nothing out of the ordinary. Could happen. After the class, the gardener told us that the owner of said house owes him a lot of money because a couple years ago he did a complete remodel and overhaul of the garden, and when he finished, the house owner asked him for a couple more days for payment. Those days turned into weeks, then turned into owner not returning gardener's phone calls, but since no contract was signed, gardener couldn't go to the police about it, or at least he couldn't legally do anything about it. So he had an argument with the owner once he ran into him. Owner straight up said he wasn't going to pay, and then he said, "What are you going to do? Go ahead, try to make my garden a mess, just like it was. You can't set foot on my property or I'll call the cops on you." Gardener ended up assuming the money was lost and moved on with it. A couple classes after the gardener told us the story, Coach told us that they had to change the tennis balls since they were old and barely bouncy anymore. They do this like every couple of months or so. There are around 3 to 4 carts with between 80 to 100 tennis balls per cart. Gardner asked Coach what he was going to do with the old ones, since there's no recycling program for tennis balls in town or nearby. Coach said, "I'm probably gonna toss them in the trash." Gardner asked Coach if he had no problem giving the balls to him after class. Coach said no. He was intrigued. After the class was finished, Gardner gathered the carts and began tossing all the balls to the house's garden. The rest of the class, Coach included, who also had heard the story that Gardner told, understood and began helping. We threw around 300-something balls to Owner's garden. Owner showed up a couple minutes later to explain, shouting, "Hey, you're doing it on purpose, making a mess in my garden," until he saw the gardener. He went mute, turned around, and left. Local police came a couple minutes later. Officer knows Gardner and chats with him for a couple minutes. Then officer tells us that there's been a complaint about people tossing balls to the house. Coach smiles and says, "You know, they're learning. Overhits happen." Officer smiles, says, "You're absolutely right. Part of learning." Turns around and leaves. It's now become a tradition. Every time the club has to change the tennis balls, coach makes sure Gardner gets all the carts for a ceremonial game of tennis basketball with owner's garden being the bucket. Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is what this guy gets for not just being a jerk, but like stiffing someone that did you a solid, did a service for your garden, and then you're like not only going to not pay him, but act like you don't owe him any kind of compensation for that. This sounds more like nuclear revenge than malicious compliance, but either way, it's a nice story, so yeah, he got what he deserved. Koth666 commented, "To my mind, using all the balls at once is the wrong way. Guy has to pick up a few hundred tennis balls every few months. I'd either save the balls up and do 1,000 at once, or save up a couple of thousand, do a couple of hundred, wait a few days and do a couple hundred more. Keep repeating so the guy thinks this is now going to keep happening every few days." Our next story is, "I can sit anywhere? Great! Company laid off my entire team and reorganized the office. I asked for a desk in a brighter area since I was no longer doing video editing. Nope, your new desk is here in this even darker corner, but there are other seating areas around the office you can use when you want to change a view. For the next 2 years until the company folded, I did not sit at that desk even once. No one ever knew exactly where I was, which had many, many advantages. There was one brief attempt to suggest that I was missing out on synergies by not sitting next to my normal supervisor. I just said, you can't have it both ways, and that was that." When simple requests get denied for seemingly no reason, I think that should automatically cue malicious compliance. So yeah, I like this. Just bounce around the office popcorn style. Our next story is, "Score it accurately? No problem. Let's just fail algebra. A man stands alone, sits alone, lies alone, waiting for a battle he doesn't know is coming. No Netflix, no... Juan prepares for another hot, dry, and dangerously boring day. His mind is his own enemy, or so he thinks. A bevy of dust, a menagerie of living confusion enters the horizon. Juan is under attack." Excerpt from my hot take on westward expansion, called How the West Was Won, a story about a man facing a potential exile from his literal and figurative home, Mexico to Arizona. I truly did think this day was going to go on without incident, MC-less as the previous 40 days, and then it happened. I got a message from a parent demanding that I accurately score the final exams I graded for my Algebra 1 class, taught to the upper echelon of 8th graders, along with students whose parents won't shut up about not being allowed to take the course. This is an expected call in a way. The district I work for gives students a final exam that's 42 questions long. The final is entered as a raw score out of 42, as a final grade, heavily weighted. About 80 homework assignments equals to the same value of the 42-question final. I've been teaching the subject for years, under the same administration, most of the time, and they've allowed me to give some grace during the grading process. This grace comes in the way of not entering a final score lower than a 60%, regardless of what score they received. The only way I score it lower is if somebody just doesn't take the exam. It then has to be a 0. One particular student, Juan, we'll call him, scored particularly poorly on the exam. Juan is the type of student who always puts things off until the last second, rarely completing homework assignments, etc. Behavior-wise, Juan's a saint. He's really a good kid otherwise, he just puts very little effort into paying attention to the instruction during class or even showing up. The rest of the class, 90% or so anyway, score anywhere between a 25 and a 35 out of 42. Entering the raw score at a weight of 80% is difficult, but it gets done. For those who score less than a 60% on the test, or about 25 or so, I enter their score as a 60, whatever your raw score was. Meaning, if someone scored a 13% or 31% on the test, their score would read 60.13 or 60.31 respectively. I don't advertise this to the kids, but they're aware of the system. I've done this for tests where students truly bombed it. There's no retakes for the finals, however, and Juan scored a 15 out of 42, roughly 35.7%. I entered his score as a 60.36 and went about my semester. His parents saw his grade change significantly. At first, I was unsure how he, who didn't do homework, had his parents thinking he scored an 80% in the early parts of the semester. I found out that he had screenshot a grade from like week 1 and used that to show them. So when the dad called, he said, "Hey, you messed up grading Juan's score on the final. You're supposed to be a math teacher, man." He then continued to berate OP pretty handily until I tried to interrupt him to explain the grading process. I finally got to explain that he scored 15 out of 42 and explained that the score of 60.36 wasn't his score, but much, much worse. He didn't seem to understand, and no, language wasn't a concern for him. He painted the phone call with many vibrant colors. He finally said to me, after cussing me out, "You need to score this test accurately. Change the grade now." Well, seeing where you put it that way, enter malicious compliance. I knew that taking a final grade and changing it from a 60.36 to a 35.71 was going to result in a failing grade in both the overall course grade as well as the obvious final grade, and it did. I took pictures along the way to show how the scores affect the grades. I pressed delete 5 times, then entered 35.71 as his percentage score out of 100. The class being failed became a major issue for everybody. The principal had to get involved to communicate with the parents, with me there to meet as well. And only then did they seem to understand what I was saying all along. "Mr. OP was trying to do Juan a favor here, but what it comes down to is that Juan has not proven by any means that he's mastered any of the Algebra 1 content, so he's going to have to retake the course." Juan's dad seemed very apologetic at that meeting. He wound up ruining the process for every future final grade. It also wound up shining a light on the whole process, in that if the proficiency bar was 55%, why was any other student required to score higher than that to be considered passing? The district notoriously waited to set the measure of proficiency on the exam until after the students have taken it, and not surprisingly, the proficiency level was very close to what the average score was district-wide. Over time, I realized that this district, the whole education system, and especially me, were nothing more than a mere joke, living in another man's dream, as Dave Chappelle so eloquently put it. Sorry, Juan. Hey, you did your job and you did exactly what the dad asked, so school policies just gotta change, man. Avid Learner Bot commented, "It's really something how the situation unfolded. The way standards are set in education often feels like a balancing act between what's fair and what's achievable, doesn't it? I'm curious about your thoughts on how these benchmarks can be adjusted to better reflect student capabilities without compromising academic integrity. I can imagine the frustration of dealing with expectations from both parents and administration. It's definitely not an easy place to be. It makes me think of a friend who's faced something similar. They had quite the time trying to navigate those waters too. Your experience seems like it could really open up some valuable conversations about how we approach teaching standards. Maybe there's room for more flexibility or a different method that considers both student effort and learning outcomes." Our next story is, "You want your uniform back? Come and get it." I used to work in a hotel as a porter. We had to wear white shirts and black pants, and they provided us with a uniform, which was just a nondescript black vest. I worked there part-time, but also had another part-time job at the post office. I told them about the second job before they hired me. They asked me what I'd do about conflicting shifts, and I said I would work for whichever company booked my time first. So if the post office said they wanted me next week on Wednesday to Saturday, and then later the hotel asked me to work that time, I'd have to say I was unavailable. I would also naturally do the same thing if the situations were reversed. I honored that agreement the entire time I worked for them, and it wasn't a problem for over a year. Then, one day, I get told by the hotel that I have to work an upcoming weekend. I said I couldn't accept the shift because I had already booked one at my second place of work. My hotel boss said, quote, "Well, this is a huge contract. We have a massive wedding taking place on the same weekend as a large conference, and we need all hands on deck." I reminded them, once again, that I couldn't accept a shift if it conflicted with one I had previously booked. Boss got real annoyed and pushy, and tried the "we have to be able to rely on you" bullcrap spiel. I reminded them that they could rely on me doing exactly what I promised in my interview, and that they had been able to rely on me for over a year. I also pointed out that it's not reasonable to demand that I work a shift that I hadn't agreed to work. Boss was still pee when he hung up. They don't fire me, but over the next month, I couldn't help but notice I never got any shift offers. It became obvious that I was being fired, but without actually being told I was fired. I called several times and asked if there were any shifts, but was always told, "We have nothing for you at this time," in a cold tone. I checked with my friends who worked at the hotel, and they all said that business was normal, and they could see no reason why I wasn't being offered shifts. No worries, I just picked up some more shifts at the post office, and they paid almost twice as much, so cool by me. Another couple of weeks go by, and my direct supervisor at the hotel called me to ask for my uniform vest back. I asked why, saying that I hadn't been fired, so as far as I know, I still work there. My boss just kept sidestepping my question and refused to answer, and refused to admit that I had been fired. He just kept saying, "We need that uniform, you have to give it back." I said, "No problem." He starts saying, "You can drop it off anytime," and I interrupted him to say, "No, I won't be dropping it off." He stopped for a moment, flustered, then said, "But you have to, it's part of your employment contract." "Yes, I know," I replied. "I read the contract. It merely states that I have to return the uniform when requested. It doesn't say I have to deliver it to you, so I won't. You can send someone to pick it up at a time that's convenient to me." The hotel was in a different city from my hometown, so it was about a half-hour to 45-minute drive to my place. My ex-boss tried to bully me, but funny how losing his ability to deny me work had shifted our power balance. He sputtered and stammered as he tried to figure out some way to goad or coerce me into driving the vest to him, but finally gave up. He said he'd send someone sometime, so be ready for whenever that is. And I told him no, that he'd have to contact me to prearrange a time that was convenient. I said I'd check my calendar and he could call me back in a couple days to make arrangements. Petty, I know, but hearing the exasperation and annoyance in his tone as we spoke was very, very enjoyable. He never did send anyone to pick up the vest, so I ended up using it as part of a Halloween costume, zombie hotel porter. Okay, so I guess technically you still have never been fired if you still have the vest and you haven't been told that you're no longer employed there. I mean, it doesn't sound like at this point you even want to go back, but that's still just like a really strange cliffhanger ending there. Ambitious Border 906 commented, "It never ceases to amaze me that a-holes like this are so quick to jettison a contract or the very first weasels to state what the contract says. You can't ignore a contract and then seek to invoke it, DB. Good on you." Environmental Bus 9713 responded, "That vest probably costs less to replace than the time he spent going back and forth to get OP to drop it off. Some managers are just incredibly dumb, and I wish failing forward/upward wasn't a thing." Our next story is Malicious Compliance to Catch a Thief, or 3. My uncle, now retired, told me this story. It happened probably around 2005 to 10, something like that. He used to work for a security company, the kind that handles factory security, night guards, access, and perimeter alarms, that kind of job. He was the senior manager of the team, handling the night shift for important clients, as well as surveying the original installation of the security equipment for those clients. He gets called in to do an installation on a factory that's been having a lot of theft. He goes there and interviews the 3 owners separately. Each one has a 30-something% stake on the company. The company is old, and whatever chemistry those 3 originally had is long, long gone. Each one voices his suspicions that the thefts are inside jobs, and each one even implies that they suspect the other 2 of being behind the thefts. Also, all 3 adamantly say that they want to know where the cameras are and that they want the thieves caught ASAP as cheaply as possible. Uncle vows to comply, but says that if they want to be cheap about it, there might be some blind spots that they can't cover. All 3 owners are okay with that. Uncle always told me that the one thing he learned on that job was that Dr. House was right. Everybody lies. So he decides to do the job with a little bit of maliciousness. All 3 owners said they wanted to know where the cameras were. All 3 said they wanted to be as cheap as possible. So Uncle and his team install 3 hidden cameras that, as a whole, cover the whole factory floor, but they budget for 2. The service is apparently a bit overpriced, so they still make money out of it, and there's a bonus for catching the thieves. However, Uncle tells each owner the location of 2 of the 3 cameras separately. To owner 1, he tells the location of cameras 1 and 2, but not 3. To owner 2, locations of cameras 1 and 3. To owner 3, location of cameras 2 and 3. They all ask for blind spots. Uncle tells them where they are regarding the cameras each one of them has been told, but those blind spots are covered by the camera each owner knows nothing about. Oh, each owner said they wanted to catch the thieves ASAP as well. Well, that Uncle did. He caught each one of the owners using their expected blind spots to sneak into the factory undetected and gather some inventory for themselves during the first week. As far as I know, the factory changed ownership and Uncle continued providing security for the new owners. What happened to the old ones, I don't know, but I suspect nothing good. Yeah, we could kind of see this one coming, right? That all three of them are crooks, but also just shout out to the amazing reference there of Dr. House. Everybody lies. Illuminatus Prime commented, "Corporate level, doesn't surprise me. Stuff like this goes on at the private level too. Neighbors, husband and wife, both approached me on separate occasions to ask me if I would slightly turn one of the cameras on my house to include at least part of their driveway. Both suspected the other was cheating, and both insisted that I not tell the other one about my involvement. The results were basically the same. Camera triggered a motion and recorded vehicles entering and leaving the driveway, and the times of their departure and arrival. These times always coincided with the times that one of the other spouse was alone at home. I sent the same record to both spouses. They divorced less than a year later." Our next story is, "I'll make your dang pizza boxes." For some background, I used to work at a family-owned pizzeria in my hometown. At the time this story took place, I had been delivering food for them as well as picking up the odd pizza oven shift for close to 8 years. Aside from the owner and 2 or 3 managers, I was their longest tenured employee. Towards the end of my stint working there, I began to feel incredibly disrespected and undervalued by the owner as well as 2 of our managers. 2 of my regular 4 shifts per week were unfortunately shared by a manager who had started at that job before me, as well as a manager who had started after me. Both of these managers had personal relationships with my boss, and neither of them actually managed anything. Scheduling our shifts was always up to the delivery drivers, waitresses, and phone people amongst themselves. We didn't actually have anybody at this pizzeria that functioned as a real manager. Anyway, the manager that had started after me, we'll call her Karen for the sake of this story, had been rudely telling me to fold pizza boxes up for about 4 days in a row. For those of you who aren't aware, when pizza boxes are delivered from the wholesalers to pizzerias, they come in stacks of 100 and they don't come folded. There are perforations along the box that make it easy to fold up, but they need to be made into boxes manually. At my pizzeria, it was the delivery people's job to fold the pizza boxes. Anyway, Karen had been rudely ordering me to fold up the pizza boxes for a few days in a row, not once actually asking or saying please. By the 4th day of this, I was fed up with being disrespected by someone who had been working there less time than I had under an imaginary title that didn't even reflect her job duties. Our seating layout consisted of 2 booths that sat 2 people, so 4 in total, per table. We had 1 table in the back that only had 1 booth that nobody used, and 1 large double table with a cornered booth that could fit a party of 10. The delivery guys would sit in the big booth in the back and use the double table to fold up the pizza boxes, unless there was a party larger than 4 people that needed the booth. So, when Karen rudely ordered me to fold up boxes for the 4th day in a row, I hatched a plan. I told my delivery partner, I'm gonna make so many boxes that they'll never ask me to make boxes again. And I did just that. I folded up enough 12-inch pizza boxes to fill the entire cornered booth in the back. That wasn't enough though, because when I took the boxes from the booth to the shelf when we stored them in the back room, I had space to make more boxes, so I filled the entire booth again. That wasn't enough either though, because I stored the boxes that were in the booth in the one table that no customers used. Naturally, since there was more room on the large booth, I filled it up with boxes for a 3rd time, making sure there was no room for any customers to sit. Of course, since my oblivious and unobservant manager didn't notice that I was doing this, apparently she noticed anytime I wasn't folding up boxes, I began storing the boxes on top of the table. I managed to cover one of the 2 tables in the back with 9 stacks of boxes before Karen noticed what I was doing and told me to stop. In my defense, I stopped folding boxes as soon as Karen told me to. Granted, by the time she had noticed what I was doing, there was nowhere for large parties to sit and nowhere else to put the pizza boxes. I lamented the fact that Karen would rather see me come into work and do what was expected of me instead of going above and beyond, and she told me to stop being a smartass. This constant disrespect and underappreciation is what eventually led me to take my talents to another local pizzeria where owners actually appreciated the work I did. Might have went a little too far with this one, but I understand your frustration, and like you said, she's probably never going to ask you to do it again. Oh wait, no, you moved to a different pizzeria. Yeah, so this isn't going to be an issue. Good for you. Technot commented, the last time I went into a pizzeria, they had someone's 15-year-old son folding the pizza boxes right behind the front register. I know it was someone's kid because I saw him sneezing into the boxes and just continuing on. And when I brought it up to the manager, he just shrugged his shoulders. I canceled my order. Our next story is, put my cat to work. I got fired from a sales job by a supervisor who was systematically eliminating everyone and hiring in her sorority sisters. I had dark black uniform skirts, pants, blouses that I'd been forced to purchase. When I was fired, they demanded the uniforms back. I offered to keep the skirts and blouses that cost up to what I'd paid to date, a couple $100 worth, but they said no, demanded all items back, and refused to give me a refund. They did say I could gather it all and bring it to them a couple of days later. After thoroughly reading my contract, I confirmed I was only required to bring them back undamaged. It didn't say they had to be clean. So, when I got home, I poured everything in a big pile and called my cat over. She was a long-haired cat who coated everything I owned in white fluff. When she understood that I was giving her free rein to sleep on the clothes, she obliged. 2 days later, I dropped off a garbage bag filled with now white, fur-covered, stinky clothes. The supervisor got annoyed, but I told her she might want to check the contract. These clothes were quite undamaged, just not clean, and that wasn't stipulated in the contract. I smiled sweetly at her and left the office. Kitty did her job quite well, and she got tuna for dinner that night. I eventually won a small claims court case, getting my uniform money back. An all-around win. And this is exactly why you read everything and write everything down, because nothing trumps a paper trail. Gotta love that. Gray Wolfen commented, "That sounds scammy if they make you buy the uniforms and then demand them back but don't reimburse you. It should be one or the other. That's why you won the lawsuit, I'm sure." Bungo Jot responded, "Had a job once that tried to do this. Made me pay for a sweater with their logo on it. This is just a temp job, but okay, fine. When I left at the end of the season, they asked for it back. I asked if they were reimbursing me for the cost. They looked confused and said no, so I kept the sweater. They were ticked, but I was like, you can have the sweater when you give back the money I paid you for it. 15 years later, I still have the dang thing. I don't even know why. I never wear it. It just sits at the bottom of my closet out of a lingering sense of spite or some crap." Our next story is, thanks for my master's degree, I used to work for a manager who was just terrible. All she was good for was approving time off. She spent most of her work time planning her vacations, delegating her actual work, and taking credit for her employees' work. And she would travel on the company dime to seminars and conferences and come back with no work-related information to share, but tons of stories about her vacation. Her work trip. She also did not believe in developing her staff. Opportunity for additional training, education, or certifications? Not for us. But she would go out of her way to take those opportunities for herself, and then give up on them as soon as she realized she would have to do the work. I had requested some in-house training that should have opened up some career opportunities for me, and she kept making excuses for why I couldn't get the trainings. It's not in the budget, we can't spare you, etc. Because she was my manager, it was completely up to her to approve it. Well, the training was $1,500, and it included the tuition, the books, and the certification testing. I finally gave up on asking and decided to apply to a graduate program in a related field to the training I wanted. Because tuition reimbursement was a company benefit and didn't require manager approval, I got accepted, and submitted my tuition reimbursement to the company for the following 2 years. In the end, the company ended up paying for my graduate degree to the tune of $12,000. All because my crappy boss wouldn't approve in-house training for $1,500. Once again, read the fine print and go ahead and take your shot once you're certain you know what you're entitled to. Also, why would an employer not want their employees to be trained? That's just kind of silly. I don't want to sign in, commented. I was stuck in a dead-end job many years back. They passed me over for promotion a few times and wouldn't release me to work in IT. I was too valuable on the team to move, but not promotion material. And to be fair, I was young and cocky. Bosses hated me. 3 managers, a director and a VP, co-workers adored me. I'm glad I was stuck because I took the tuition reimbursement, finished my degree, and my career catapulted in tech from there. The language in the application made it sound like they expected you to stick around. You had to line up your degree with your possible career paths internally to get into the program, but there was nothing requiring loyalty for X years or payback, etc. I made sure of that because I'd lined up a tech job with a $12,000 pay increase and was ready to be gone. I submitted my resignation a few days after my last semester check cleared. Bosses, there were 4 of them in earshot, were shocked. They tried to tell me I'd have to pay everything back, but this wasn't the first time I'd had to lawyer them and told them more or less where to stick it. Our next story is Time is Money. I worked for a company years ago, rhymes with American Distress, that bought out another company, nicknamed Deathco. Our manager was actually booted out by corporate and replaced by the manager, we'll call her Patty, from the bought-out company. We soon realized that she had some policies and expectations of employees that didn't sit well with those of us who took the legal meaning of our non-salaried positions quite seriously. Apparently, her staff meetings were held after work hours with everyone expected to stay and participate, but without overtime pay. Upon the first such meeting beginning at 5 p.m., there was a mass exodus of the original American Distress employees who were paid hourly. The looks on the faces of Patty and the Deathco employees were priceless. The next day, there was a memo circulated stating that all future staff meetings would be held during the workday. Yeah, there are few things more annoying than, after a long day at work, being forced to stay after hours for like a mandatory meeting or something like that. So I don't blame these people for leaving and seeking out greener pastures. Good for you to have the ability or the luxury to be able to do that. NeoThinks commented, "Heck yeah, if they ain't paying, I ain't staying. This is why I also tend to skip out on off-hours team building things. I got my own life, marriage, friends, etc. outside of work. I'll hang out with coworkers if we have shared interests and are just chill like that, but I don't care about the company bowling league or interdepartment bingo night. If it's something actually work-related, it can happen on the company dollar." Our next story is, sure, I won't wear a tank top during my workout. A little background first. I, now 45-year-old male, used to be a military driver in the Dutch Navy a long time ago, and at some point I was stationed at a little Navy base, meant for physical rehabilitation of Navy personnel. With little, I mean a base with less than a few hundred people. My function was to drive patients to the military hospital, CMH, to drive groups of people to the swimming pool, etc. When I was home on the weekends, I would do my workout at my regular gym. But on weekdays, when I finished with my work, I would train on a small gym on site where I was stationed, because I would stay on base during the week. I was about 21 years old and I was preparing for my very first bodybuilding contest, so I was muscular and working out a lot. At some point, the gym manager, a Marine sergeant, told me that somebody at upper management was offended by my looks and that I was no longer allowed to wear a tank top during my workout. My tank top was weight-fitting and purely functional, and seemingly nobody was ever bothered by me wearing it. At least that's what I thought. I argued with him about how unfair I thought this was and pointed towards a fellow gym goer who was also wearing a tank top and asked the sergeant why this guy wasn't told not to wear a tank top during his workout. This man was athletic and in fair shape, but not bulky or muscular. The sergeant, I got along with him very well, agreed with me, but told me that the officers in charge ordered him to tell just me, and orders are orders. He agreed with me though, but the higher-ups already decided, so he felt that he did not have a choice. At that point, I just took my loss and finished my workout. The next day, I found the perfect solution and took one of the shirts we got in our Dutch PSU, which roughly translates to personal standardized gear. This shirt was a stretchy, slim-fitted white shirt, so I decided to wear that for my next workout. When I arrived to the gym, the sergeant shook his head and told me that this was not what the officers in charge would appreciate. So I told him that was what the Navy gave me, so it cannot be wrong. My body was much more on display compared to the tank top. The tight fit showed everything, especially when I was sweating. I was fully compliant with the dress code and nobody would be able to dispute that. The sergeant laughed because he knew I was right, but told me the officers probably would be ticked. I kept doing my workout like this during that week, and after the weekend, the sergeant told me with a smile that higher-ups retracted their order and to please start wearing my tank top again. Even though he's kind of being a smartass here, this is also quite brilliant because you're wearing something that the Navy themselves gave directly to you. So it's like, how could it not be okay if this is what the people are telling me I shouldn't be wearing gave me? So yeah, good job. Night Otter commented, "When I was younger, I was on a swim team. My first posting didn't have a pool with lap lanes, so I'd go before the afternoon rush on the days I was off work or on mids. I'd do my laps, then park myself in a corner to rest and get some sun. The second week I did this, the head lifeguard approached me and asked if I had any other swimsuits to wear. Yes, but they're all the same color and style. Well, we've had complaints from parents about your skimpy suit. I do laps and wear Speedos. What's wrong with that? Well, the main person complaining is married to a senior officer. I'll go get trunks. you've seen me doing laps. How long do you think the trunks will stay on? So, yeah, the next time I did laps, there was screaming and yelling halfway through. My trunks had slipped off, but I was wearing a Speedo underneath. Near the end of the summer, I was told I could go back to Speedos. The base commander had a thing about spouses using their partner's rank to browbeat enlisted junior officers, and worst of all, civilian staff. I'm assuming that Mrs. Senior Officer and the Senior Officer had a meeting with the base commander. Our next story is, Deny My Leave? We'll see who wins this game. This was a few years back when I was active duty military, officer in the healthcare side of things. Overall, loved my time in, but the bureaucracy of a huge organization like the military eventually wore on me. As a healthcare professional, I would often use my days off to moonlight or work in private practice since the money is way better. This is perfectly acceptable in the military, and most providers do. There's some hoops you have to jump through, but most commanders are fine with it. They often do it themselves. Unfortunately, people come and go, and we ended up with the first sergeant that liked to stick it to the officers whenever he could. So there was a time that I submitted leave for a day I was supposed to work in private practice, and he denied the day off on a technicality. I don't remember what it was. Maybe I submitted a day late or something like that. I wasn't going to let this stop me, though. I quickly reviewed our sick call policy and made sure to download a copy of it. Officers were treated with quite a bit of leniency, and there was no requirement to report or work or submit a doctor's note unless you were out for 3 days or more. This is what the policy stated. Also important is that this was the experience of every other officer in the unit. No one did anything more than call in sick if they were to miss a day. So the day that I requested off rolls around, and I unfortunately developed the sniffles and called in sick. First Sergeant is not happy, and he tells me to report to sick call and submit a doctor's note. I told him sure, just show me the policy that says I have to do that. We went back and forth on this all morning while I was working at the private practice. He kept reiterating that I needed a note. I kept telling him I feel that he's unfairly targeting me in a way that other officers have not been. He finally came back with, "The commander says you need a doctor's note, so you need one." This was not something I could argue with, at least not in the moment. In the military, if the commander says to do something, you pretty much have to do it. Cue malicious compliance. Due to a weird quirk, my private practice office and house is an hour from the base I work at. There is, however, a base in the town where I live, too. I had previously been stationed there, but got moved down the road and didn't want to move the family, so I just decided to commute. So rather than drive all the way to base where I work, I devised a plan to go to the one more local to me. By this time, it's close to lunch, and I have about an hour before my next patients at the private practice. So I quickly drive to the hospital ER, and as I'm walking in, I start to convince myself of how sick I feel. By the time I walk through the doors and check in, I've got a pretty good show going and tell reception that I've been throwing up all morning and can't keep anything down. Nurse says, "Yeah, you don't look too good," which I'm not sure how to take. Provider sees me quickly and diagnoses a stomach virus. Asks me why I came in for it, and I say Commander made me for the note. He's irritated by that, but used to it. I'm about to be let go, and he decides since I've been throwing up, he should get some fluids in me and orders an IV. I glance at my watch, and I have about 30 minutes left of my lunch, and with the busy morning, I hadn't kept up on my fluid intake, so I figure, why not? So they hook up the IV, and I chill on my phone for the next 20 minutes getting nice and hydrated. Unfortunately, my lunch was almost over, and the bag is only about half empty. Cut to me unhooking the bag and squeezing the remainder into the sink. Hooked it back up. Nurse comes in and sees it's empty, and I'm on my way. Doctor's note in hand, nice and hydrated, and in plenty of time to finish my schedule of patients after lunch. Hey, fake it till you make it. I don't think that there's very many people reading this or listening right now that haven't at least once in their lives faked illness in order to get out of doing something or to get a doctor's note. So, yeah, you gave them what you wanted. You got that doctor's note. Gadget850 commented, LOL. I was a senior NCO in headquarters platoon. So there were a bunch of soldiers I didn't know and did not work for me. First Sergeant grabbed me one morning and told me about 2 young soldiers who went on sick call every Monday for diarrhea and got quarters. We both knew these rocket surgeons were drinking all weekend and sleeping it off on Monday. I knew the PA at the aid station, so we had a little chat. He looked at the logbook and saw the pattern. He told me he would take care of it. The next Monday, they roll into sick call and the PA determines they're dehydrated and they spend the entire morning hooked to saline and the staff keeping them awake. He then sends them back to duty and they never pulled that crap again. Our next story is, the boss didn't trust his team, so I built a system to track every move we made. A few years ago, I worked at a mid-sized company where the atmosphere was, let's say, not ideal. The manager had this ever-growing suspicion that people were just waiting for the right time to leave. He believed that morale was low and that the team was barely holding it together. And while I'm not sure where he got this idea, he started imposing more and more controls on us to monitor productivity. One day, he introduced a new rule. Every task, email, every conversation must be logged, no exceptions. The justification? I need to know exactly what you're doing, and I need to be sure nothing's falling through the cracks. Now, here's the problem. My team was already working at full capacity, dealing with multiple tasks every single day. But suddenly, we were being told to log everything. If you were sending a simple email, you had to log it. Writing a report? Log it. Setting up a meeting? Log it. Every little action had to be documented. I tried explaining how ridiculous this was, but the response was always the same. I need to make sure you're on task. He didn't trust us to do our jobs, so he created a system where every move had to be tracked and validated by someone else. I didn't see any way out of it, so I decided to comply. But I wasn't going to make it easy. I started logging everything, and I mean everything, down to the smallest tasks. Simple emails, logged. A quick 10-minute meeting to touch base, logged. I even started logging the amount of time I spent thinking about the best way to word my emails, because hey, it was part of the task, right? To top it off, I made sure my logs were detailed as heck. I meticulously logged every action, no matter how insignificant. The result? It was chaos. The logs were piling up, but all they did was waste more of my time. The manager was reviewing everything and asking questions about tasks that had no bearing on the big picture. Meanwhile, I could barely get through a day without constantly being interrupted by the need to document my every move. And then it happened. The manager finally asked, "Why is everything taking so long?" I gave him a simple reply. "You asked for everything to be logged." He didn't like hearing that, but the best part was when he finally realized that the whole system was making us less productive. His solution? We were told to just log what's necessary. The policy was quietly dropped and things slowly started to return to normal, but by then I had already built something of my own. After all the frustration of logging every single action, I realized there had to be a better way. So I started building a tool that could automatically track everything, without the annoying back and forth or wasted time. I wasn't looking to change the whole company, I just wanted a way to do my job without all the micromanagement. What started as a workaround eventually grew into a full-fledged solution, and I realized that this frustration had pushed me to create something far more effective than the system we were using. Funny how the lack of trust can sometimes spark the most innovative ideas. Yeah, being micromanaged, incredibly annoying. Kudos to you for not documenting your bathroom breaks, though. I would have to be a little extra petty there and be like, yeah, I'm gonna go just drop a massive dump right now, and that'll take approximately 7 to 10 minutes. And then you go into more detail about the sounds and the smells, like really give the people what they want. EggsW3555 commented, "But did you log the time you spent writing logs?" Enterprise SRL responded, "Yeah, I did. I even logged the time I spent writing the logs. If I was going to follow the rules, I figured I might as well do it properly." Not Quite Dead Yet Photo responded, "I was once asked to provide justification for a charge. It was a 0 FTE on the contract. It was 0.1 hours, or 6 minutes. I could have rounded up to 0.2, but I felt guilty for even doing so to answer what was an easy question and walk them through the steps. So what happened? My PM got a call saying I had to write up a justification for the charge. There is a whole form that had to be filled out, submitted, and reviewed, then signed, and it generally took 10 minutes. I stared at them and said, "Are you serious?" while they tried to come up with a way for me to do it on my own time and not charge the contract. Freak that. So I spent 10 minutes filling out the form, billed the contract for 0.2 hours, and went on my way. 3 weeks later, I got called into the PM with the same request to justify my 0.2 hours. Again, the conversation. Do it on your own time, and freak that response. Then I asked if I was to bill this meeting, which had already taken 10 minutes, so the new charge would be 0.4 hours if they wanted me to proceed. At this point, I achieved the Pyrrhic victory. I was formally removed from the crap show of that contract, and PM finally grew enough reproductive parts to tell the customer this is stupid. Not in those words. Our next story is, Followed health and safety, coworker complained. So I got 2 stories here for y'all, both from the same job and within a month of each other. The story begins with me working at a large grocery store chain as a cart pusher. Day in, day out, I would be outside bringing carts in. That position had the single highest turnover rate in the entire store. We had to bring all the carts in manually without one of those electric pushers. Because I had other duties as well, like helping cashiers, we would often be bringing in anywhere from 7 to 15 carts to load. Health and safety stated we were not to do more than 5 a load. I was a naive teenager. Plenty of my coworkers developed back problems, and one of the cashiers started giving me painkillers out of pocket so I wouldn't complain. When regional visited, they pulled from other departments to make it look like we were following code. I took the issue to the union rep, but she was a supervisor who didn't care. I took it to my department's manager, and she told me I'm welcome to find a new job, so I did just that. About a year into COVID, I decided enough is enough, and I'm not breaking my back for minimum wage. I put my 2 weeks in the moment I had another job lined up. For those last 2 weeks, I followed health and safety to the letter. 5 carts a load. Suddenly, ever-reliable me was hardly ever in the store. I remember one day towards the end, I got called into the store manager's office for a complaint. One of my coworkers complained that I wasn't pulling my weight and he had to pick up the slack. I told them that I'm simply following the safe limit as stated by the guidelines. I could see the steam coming from boss man's ears, but he couldn't do anything. He told the other guy that I was right and he would send someone else from a different department to help. That was one of the most satisfying days of that horrid job. The second one happened about a month before, again during peak COVID. We were allowed 1.5 hours of paid leave during scheduled hours to get our vaccine shot, mandated by the local government. This was when I was already looking for a new job, so I had no real love for the store. I scheduled my shot on the busiest day of the week, just after my half-hour unpaid lunch. As we were instructed, I told my immediate supervisor about it when I walked in. It was the union rep supervisor. No issues. I go for my break around noon, no issues. I come back down to the store floor and get told by the supervisor that carts need to be done urgently. I tell her I can't because I'm getting my vaccine, as we discussed this morning. She asks why I couldn't do it during my break. A smile shot across my face as I informed her I'm just following the mandate, and that she would have to deal with the carts in my stead. She was furious but relented. I got my shot within 20 minutes and spent the rest of my paid leave eating a pizza. Yep, they make ridiculous rules. You follow and comply with those rules, so what can they say? What can they do? Nothing. Nothing is what they can do. You do your homework, OP. Good job. Don Draper commented, "This sounds like a Kroger. I worked in meat and seafood there and would get paged to help out in front and do that crap and run the register all the time. Also had a toothless union rep that didn't actually help much." Lamedic22 commented, "That could just be part of good customer service. When I ran a grocery store in the 70s, we played games, designed displays to attract and keep your attention, gave samples, etc., to keep customers in the store. The longer they stayed, the greater chance they would spend more. But the rule was, customers can shop as long as they want, but when they were ready, they shouldn't have to wait and check out excessively. If the line was more than 2 deep, we opened another register. Everyone, even the head meat cutter, knew they might be called to bag groceries when we were backed up. We had lots of happy customers." Our next story is, "You must read the text you've memorized." I do client interviews all day, every day, 6 to 9 appointments a day. Every single one starts with the same script. It's an entire page of text, 3.5 minutes of regularly paced speech. I, however, have always had a great memory, so I have it, and several other standard scripts, memorized. Every manager in my past has been impressed by this. My current manager, who I with all sincerity fear is developing memory issues herself unfortunately, decided to take offense to this and reported it to her supervisor, who then took the issue to our policy department, who insisted the script must be read from the page. This irritates me because I have it so well memorized that I'm able to complete other actions on the client's cases and review reports and such while I recite. My compliance? I now sit there with the script in hand, held upside down with my eyes closed as I pretend to read it. If anyone calls me out on this, I swear to the almighty that I'm going to request a Braille version as a reasonable accommodation, and I'll just sit there sliding my fingers around on it while I recite. Stupid rule, really stupid rule. Again, you're taking a strength that one of your employees has and basically shrinking them and limiting their capacity. Why? Who knows? Insecurity? I guess. Mighty OGS commented, I'm in an industry with extremely fine tolerance for freak-ups, and whose incidents are often international news. Even when we've done a job hundreds of times before, we're always required to consult the manual and cite the exact procedure we used, and the revision status of the manual. It's all CYA and lessons written in blood. Yours is thankfully less consequential, and your exaggerated reaction is justified and hilarious. Flying Key commented, without even looking at your profile pic, I was thinking aviation? Yep, that checklist might have 2 items on it and you've done it 1,000 times before. Still gotta pull it out and read it. Our next story is, hours are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.? Okay. I was working for a major aerospace company, and one day a senior executive VP was at the entrance harassing people that were a few minutes late. The job is 8 to 5 with an hour for lunch. Fine. Then he got on the PA system and announced the same. Fine. 4 p.m. staff meeting. 5 p.m. hits, everyone except our manager stood up and walked out. One of the last ones out the door said, the job is 8 to 5 with an hour for lunch. So staff meetings were moved to 3 p.m. Really not a whole lot to say here. This happens all the time, everywhere. If they are hard pressed on the hours that you have to work, as soon as you hit that quitting time, as they say, you're out of there. Another user commented, I work for a Fortune 500 company. We work when we want to. Pretty much the only rules are attend your meetings and be available during core working hours of 10 to 3. When I worked on campus, I'd typically roll in between 9 to 10 and leave around 4. Now that I work from home, it's much more flexible. Our next story is, HOA pulled an Uno reverse. Not the typical story you'll find on here, but I think you guys will find it humorous. For context, I work in the customer service department of a company that still does door-to-door sales. Today, I got a call from a gentleman stating that he was the president of his HOA and needed to add the entire HOA to our Do Not Visit list. I kindly explained that I would be happy to add his address, but I cannot add any other addresses without the permission of the individual residents. He proceeds to tell me that he's the president and I'm going to do it because they voted for this. No sir, I will not. He hangs up on me. Calls back 10 minutes later, assuming he will get a different person, but we're a small company and I'm the only one on the phone. I patiently explained to him that our system does not allow us to enter an address without a unique call identifier, and even if I try to enter more than one address, I'll get an error message that the address has already been added, even if it hasn't. He begrudgingly admits defeat, or so I thought. I received no less than 120 calls from this HOA, all asking to have their address added. I got nothing else done and am emotionally exhausted. I had to shut down the chat feature on our website, and when I left today, I still had about 50 unanswered voicemails. If I wasn't on the receiving end of this, I might actually respect the HOA for this move. Wow, yeah, this is quite literally the old Uno reverse playback. I mean, my goodness, double malicious compliance. That has to be frustrating, but it's like, they're doing exactly what you told them to do and you're just doing your job, so everybody loses as a result of stupid rules. Talon13 commented, Hi buddy, I'm in a HOA that also did this a couple years ago. One of the few good things our HOA did that nobody argues about. We have signs at every entrance from public streets that say no unauthorized soliciting. When the company refused to do as our representative asked, we did the next best thing. HOA filed a criminal complaint of harassment and trespassing against the company. A couple weeks later, after 2 of their salespeople were arrested, fined for trespassing, the company suddenly flipped and said they would do it. So roll the dice if you like, but your better option would be to block off that entire neighborhood in your Do Not Visit list. Made a couple edits for accuracy. Have a day. Alright everybody, that is all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. With that all being said, I will see you all next time.